Hello everyone, welcome back to another video by clip on my YouTube channel, and in this video I'm gonna walk you through how do I structure the top end drum sections. When I say that, I mean on the hi-hats and the snare. So welcome to the new video, and as I already said, in this video I'm gonna share with you how do I structure and how do I position my top end. In general, the drum section is the most important for a great sounding track, so the kick and the bass with the rest of the drums are gonna carry more than 50% of our mixes. And if the drums are done correctly, if they are good sound designed and they are mixed properly, the chances for a great sounding tracks are much higher. The drums are the most repeated elements in our music. We are working in a fast BPM music, so that means that all the drum elements are gonna be repeated really often. And also Psytrance music is popular because there's going to be a lot of things happening at the same time. So it's really important how do we structure all of these elements, especially the drums. So if we do the drums correctly, the mix is going to be much easier later on to mix the leads, single shot sounds and other elements. So after the kick and bass, I'm moving usually to the hi-hats, and when I'm designing my templates or the drum section, I'm gonna add one hi-hat, another one, and the first element after the kick and bass, I always add the closed hi-hat. So I already said that on kick, I will always put the closed hi-hat on the kick just to increase and to have this different sounding top end of the kick, but I'm gonna always glue it together with the kick because I want to limit myself. I do not want to have as many channels as the track is progressing, because one of the most important things that I learned in the last few years, and one of the things that really pushed my music to the next level, is that I learned that if I limit myself, if I limit the ability or the options while the track is progressing, that there are much less chances that I'm gonna destroy something, as I will have much less choices and I will be concentrating on really important things. So if I have the kick on one channel and I have the close hi-hat in one channel, if they sound good enough, I'm gonna bounce them together, because I do not want to be in a dilemma later on when I have a lot of other elements. Should I maybe change the level of that hi-hat or the kick or the balance of it? So as the track progresses and I'm coming to the end of it, I'm starting to bounce all these elements, and that way I'm limiting myself and limiting options that are gonna just distract me for the most important things. Alright, so after the kick and the bass, first thing I'm adding is a close hi-hat, and this close hi-hat is going on the same position as open hi-hat. It's just close, it's really short and it's really powerful. It's gonna have like a really good punch or the strong transient. This is the second element. The third element that I'm adding is the snare, because I really believe this is one of the most important things. As someone who used to play drums, one of the most beautiful things about drums is the snare, because you're gonna punch that snare with your right hand most likely, and this feeling of just punching that snare is the most beautiful from all, if you ask me. So the snare is really different from all other drum elements, but the snare, it does have the metal net on the beneath, so when you punch it, it vibrates and it punch the membrane of the down part of the snare, and that way create that beautiful sounding element in our drums, and also it can bring actually a lot of power. So the next element is the snare. After that, I'm bringing something that I call like fast hi-hats. These are kind of a close hi-hats. They just gonna go on each 16. I'm gonna apply some side chaining on them just to create this grooviness and this beautiful feeling on them. So this is the next element, like. And the fourth really important part of the top end is the open hat. Open hat actually announce and enters the peak of the track or the most energetic part of the track, and the moment when open hat goes, we know that everything is all the way to the ceiling. This is the maximum point, this is the peak of the track, this is where the whole energy goes up. So let's hear that open hat. Without. Alright, so these are 4 elements. You just need to drop in the snare, the close hi-hat, the fast hi-hat. Now let's dive a little bit deeper inside, and I'm gonna open all these folders which I just created for you. Alright, so the snare section actually contains 4 different snares. I'm really careful and I really like my snares, and I'm really careful how I design them. I'm gonna pay attention when I design my snares. It will have always one clap, because the clap is gonna bring that fullness, the warmth. It's gonna cover that mid section. It's gonna sound amazing. It's gonna make the whole snare section to stand out a little bit. It's gonna be stereo. It's gonna be, I don't know, warm sounding. I will have beneath that 1, 2, or 3 different snares, which I'm gonna use to create color, warmth, and also the most important, the punch, because the snare is made from, let's say, sine wave, like something around 200, like boop. And then it's gonna have some noise like psh. So it's gonna be short and it can be really punchy. So the clap without the snare, for me it sounds beautiful, but in the moments as this part of the track, when open hat is going, there's just not enough power. Of course, this is particularly for this type of the tracks. It not necessarily mean that you need to do it. I'm just explaining how do I structure my top end section. All right, so let's go through them. I'm gonna put the first snare over here. So this is some kind of a combination of the clap and the snare together, and I like the color of it, but I kept it, but as you can hear, it's really on a low level. The second one, this is also, but what's really special about this one is that it really have like really good punch. So there's a tail, there's this noisy effect on the tail of it, but the punch is really nice, and this is why I kept it in this track. And there's another snare. The main reason for this snare is because it really has amazing punch, and this snare particularly I used in many different tracks. Of course you will not be able to hear it because it's not that recognizable, because it's just one layer that's just gonna bring that punch on the kick. So when the clap comes in beneath it on a certain level, just to punch it a little bit, and that way it just brings that clap to stand out a little bit. So basically when we are listening to the tracks in a full mix, when open hat and leads are going, most likely we're gonna hear the clap, because clap ability is just to stand out through the mix. But we are increasing the power of that clap with these snare punches beneath it, and that way I believe I am making the whole snare section just to stand out and also to have the power. So in my tracks I always use the combination of the snare and the clap, not necessarily 4 layers as in this one, but 2 layers at least, 1 clap, 1 snare. Alright, so let's hear the clap now. So if I play the kick and the bass with just the clap, Alright, so let's open this folder, and here I have like a bunch of the layers. And in general, I always try to find the combination. I want this section to sound soft and beautiful, and also a bit powerful. So when the leads are coming in, if they have a lot of highs and mids, I need to have something with the transient to punch there. And also if I want to bring the track like to be faster or more energetic, like 808 close hi-hats, like strong ones, like they're gonna increase the speed or the energy of that track. While I'll also really love this kind of shaker sounds in my tracks. So for my tracks, sorry. So something like, not this one, I think it's this one. Yeah. So this type of the layers or the elements just create this softness, this smoothness, the beautiful thing. And also maybe in some part of the track, I'm gonna use only this layer without this sharp or the stronger elements like this one. This one I'm gonna use in the moments when I'm gonna boost the whole energy up. This is why I'm not using only one layer, because in this particular track I only have that one, but in many tracks I usually, in some moments I use just this one, for example. So I like to divide this softness, this smoothness of the hi-hat, and also the power of them in a form of another layer where it's gonna have much stronger transient. So this with the transient, I'm just gonna put it in a moment of a tracks when I want to boost energy up, but I might use this soft feeling in some other parts as well. So this is why I like always to have them in a two different sections, because I can play around with the different elements and that way to create this smoothness. All right, this is when it comes to the structure of these elements. So basically, how do I process them further on? Now, these fast elements like this one on this group, I usually get rid of the transients because I always use many of the layers like this one, for example. And then I add this one and third one. So if they have a bunch of the transients and if they go all together, they're gonna create a madness, because the hi-hats are usually come with the strong transients, and kick is also with a higher transient, the bass line is with a high transient, so there's going to be just too much. And not necessarily all elements need to have this much of the peaks or the transients. So what I do, all these groups I send to the group of the drums, and then I process them on a certain way. So the idea is to have this group of the fast hi-hats, or this that they're going really fast, to reduce the level of the peaks so they can sound more soft, more nice, but they're gonna be there just to speed up a track a little bit. So if I have the strong transients on all elements, I'm not gonna be able to put attention on certain elements which I believe that are really important to have, like snare and open hat. Like open hat, I really like it when the open hat comes in. If it have a strong transient, it just chop out the track like really nice, and that way the energy is much higher than in comparing if the open hat does not have kind of stronger transient. So these elements like fast hi-hats I send to this group, and then there are three different ways how we can approach this. We can use any saturation or distortion to cut off all these peaks. Sometimes I use Saturn with broken tube, sometimes I use standard clip just to saturate and get limit of all of them, and sometimes I use invisible limiter G2, which I believe is the best sounding option because it's really transparent. It's not gonna change the sound that much. It's gonna limit, it's gonna cut all these peaks, but it's not gonna change the sound of it. Like any distortion you're gonna put, any clipper, it's gonna add a little bit of low end. There's going to be a certain change in a sound, which in some moments it sounds really nice, but it's not a solution for every case. So inserting invisible limiter G2 and then just moving ceiling down. Now, for how much I'm gonna do it, I'm not gonna pay attention on the numbers. I'm not gonna check that much of the how much it reduced here, like visually. I'm gonna listen to it and I'm gonna search for a sweet spot. I'm gonna overdo it in one moment and I'm gonna do it less, and then I'm gonna try to find that sweet spot where I believe it sounds the best. And in this case, it's minus 6.7. So why I believe also is important, because if I have many different layers and then transient is loud this much, on the another layer is loud less or more, so somehow to equalize them, to squash all of these layers into kind of one element. So I believe that just getting rid or kind of limiting all these peaks on a certain level is going to create them to sound as a one unit. Of course, in this section I'm going to put the loops as well and other things, and in this particular case I also have two layers of the snare sections, like the clap and the first snare I also send to this group. Now from this group it goes to A.3 and 4 bus. This is a bus, and the rest of the elements I send to this one because I do not want to put to the limiter, I do not want to put open hat, I do not want to put two layers of the snare as well, because I want to keep them strong, or I would like to shape their transients on a different level. level because I do not want to reduce this much of the transient on the open hat definitely. So there are many layers, but as I already said, I divide them in 4 groups. This is a close hi-hat that goes the first, like with the kick and the bass, like this one. Snare. Last. And open hat. So snare and open hat, I want to have them strong transient, and this is why I'm reducing on all other elements a little bit of the transient, because when the snare and open hat comes in, I want them to chop the track. I do not want that much all the rest of the elements. Not necessarily mean that in some tracks I won't add one more layer of the fast hi-hats just to increase the punch and to chop the tracks a little bit more, but generally this is how I structure them. So when it comes to the group processing, here, as I already said, the getting rid of the peaks in certain level, and lately I use a lot this Suit 2, which I believe is really handy plugin. So sharpness is a little bit high, the depth, selectivity also, and I'm selecting only the top end. So what am I looking for over here? So if I play all of these fast hi-hats over here, almost every hi-hat will have a bunch of these peaks and these irregularities. So what I'm looking for is just to catch all of those and to bring them a little bit back in the mix. So if I use the Suit now, let's say Suit, and if I increase the sharpness, selectivity, yeah, something like this, and if I do this over here, and if I reset the FFT, and if I bring the attack down, and if I increase that even more, Suit 2 is gonna look for all these peaks or the resonances, it's gonna bring them down, and that way I get much more clear top end and kinda better sounding, clearer. And also if I put the Suit 2 on groups, it's gonna also make them to sound as a one unit, not that much difference. So all these peaks on a different elements, they can jump on a different position of the track, and that way create this difference. You can hear them separately, and if you put Suit 2 on them, it can just glue them together. All right, so this was it from the open hat. Open hat, I always like to put in stereo, as I hear in some tracks and some people are putting the open hat, which is mono, and I believe it's a mistake because kick and bass are taking a lot of space in the mid and they are in the low area mostly, or actually they are saturated in the low frequencies. So the open hat, if we just put all the elements that are higher in the frequency, if we just put them on a side, they just sound much better in my opinion. So open hat, definitely always stereo in my case, and even though this open hat was already stereo, as you will be able to see over here, I increased that by stereo enhancer and I made it to sound even more stereo, and that way it just sits much better in the mix, because later on there's going to be a bunch of the leads coming in, and open hat, if it's mono, in some tracks it just disappears inside and it can find its own space if you just put it on the side. All right, so this is the basically all of it, and all the drums are gonna go through this group, and then on this group I'm gonna put another Suit. Of course it's not gonna be that much, actually it is, but it just catches the highest frequencies and just bring them down, and somehow it sounds much smoother. And you can check the video about the Suit because I already showed. As it goes higher and higher, I want Suit to bring more of those peaks down, and that way creates much softer sounding elements or the hi-hats. Let's hear how it sounds in the mix. Alright guys, so this was all from this video, and I hope that you like it, and this was how am I treating and how do I structure my top end in my tracks. See you soon with another video. Bye!